If you're new to the channel and you like what you see, well, welcome to Life of Gaz. Now, I try my best to upload a new video every single Wednesday, and if you want to keep up to date with that, make sure you hit the subscribe button and more importantly ring the bell to get all the notifications. Well guys, we're back and welcome back to Life of Gaz and welcome to part 2 of pike fishing out here at Stanley Park. But I can tell you a quick recap on last week. I did fish to start off with on the other side of the island, didn't get a run, not even a bite there, no interest whatsoever. I picked up and moved and within 15 minutes I'd picked up my first fish. Now the fun didn't stop there, I carried on picking up fish for the rest of the session, so you're about to see the last hour and 45 minutes of my session and see what turns up. So the highlights from last week really just go down to this one pike. Now don't get me wrong, I was really happy to get hold of this fish because that was the target species, the whole reason I'm here. He was only a small little guy and he weighed in at about 3.5 pounds. But after this fish was put back, I had about another 15-minute wait, and then all of a sudden I got another rod decide to run off across the lake. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up on this fight from this fish and carry on and see what happens. Now this little guy was the rod that I cast over near that snag, so I had to be quite sort of aggressive really at the start of this fight and just try and get that fish clear from that area, and once I did he swam over towards me, which meant playing him was really easy, and then all I needed to do was turn him into that net. This guy came in at a little bit bigger and still similar size, maybe about £0.5 pound more, maybe up to about £4, but just like all the pike which I catch today, he deserved a picture for the album. So after a couple of minutes recovering in the net, this fish swam off fine, but what we'll do is take this advantage to tell you guys a little bit about the tactics I'm using. That's for anyone who really didn't see the video which I put on last week, which is the first half of this session. But the quick summary is that I'm using two 2 3/4 pound test curve rods. These have both got bait runners on, and I'm fishing a running leisure down to a pike trace, a wire trace with 2 treble hooks on it. Now the running leisure doesn't have a stopper at the top, it can run all the way back up the line, so you can get quite long runs doing this method, but I find this quite effective when I'm fishing in this sort of style. Now also as well for bait I'm using herring, mackerel, sprats and roach as well, and these all came frozen out of a pike pack, and believe me, every single one of them will be picking a fish up today. Now here's another avid fisher, we've got a heron there, which further supports the fact that there must be small bait fish in here, just due to the amount of predatory animals which I'm seeing hanging around here. But he does look quite gangly for trying to sit up in the top of that tree. So when it comes to my pike fishing setup, you may notice that I don't have anything like alarms or anything like that on there, and the reason for that is because I like to watch my rod tips. It's a habit I've had ever since I was young. But I have been talking to a few people and I've been recommended backbiters, so I will be adding these to my setup in case I miss one of the rod tips, twitch or move. Now a tactic which I decided to use today was, if I'd caught a pike, was to not cast directly back to that same area, to sort of move it about sort of 10 yards either to the left or to the right, in further or out further. And this is a tactic which seemed to be working for me, because not long after pulling that second pike in, then I managed to hook up on a third pike. Now this one again was over by those snags but was on the other side of them, and this one gave me a lovely nice sort of very deliberate run which gave me a great target to strike into. Now with this guy, he was hooked right at the sort of front of his mouth, so I had access to both of those trebles whilst the fish was in the net in the water, which meant unhooking him, I didn't need to lay him out on the ground to do it, I could just unhook him from within that net. But when going over to get a picture with him, unfortunately I decided to pick the net up and leave the hooks in there, and I ended up taking the hooks with me as well. So what I did was took those hooks back out, threw them back in the water, and then got this picture for you. Now with a quick rebait, I've changed over to mackerel tails. Now I'm rebaiting after every cast anyway, especially every cast which pulls a fish up. But normally what I'd try and do is I'd try and stay on the fish types which are actually producing fish. Unfortunately, I was starting to run low now at this part of the session, so I had to mix and match it. But luckily, that didn't matter, as no matter what I put out there, it seemed to work this afternoon. While staring back down my rods, waiting for the next bite, and having a look around the sort of lake itself and see what else was going on, I spotted yet another predatory species fishing in the lake. Now this cormorant did come up with a fish. Unfortunately, by the time I got my camera out and focused on it, he'd already swallowed it. So you can just see him just sort of clearing his throat of the weed that came out with that fish. Now whilst fishing here, I also picked up a line bite as well. This is where something just clips your line and you just hear that tick out through your bait runner. Now, although this could have been a duck or a swan, there weren't any sort of close enough really to me. It could have been a pike moving underwater, but more likely is the fact that it was a carp, because I was fishing in the channel, across the channel, and fishing across that channel I did see a few sort of swirls of big fish sort of moving up and down it occasionally. Now I've been having quite a good day's fishing, sitting out here at the end of winter and just sitting out in that sort of very sort of late winter sun. Now when you're just sitting there taking the world in and watching everything around you, watching some of the wildlife, waiting for your rods to do something, that sort of brings you on to the art of fishing, which is the art of staying absolutely motionless, completely still and relaxed, but also being hyperly aware of any movement on your rods and jumping up into action as soon as you get a bite. And here we have, making his way to the net, pike number 4. Now this was a lively little guy right from the off, and he sort of just tried darting around a little bit as I was bringing him in. Now when it comes to netting him, it took me a couple of attempts to actually get him in the net, but I don't mind that as long as I get him in there eventually. But when it comes to taking the photos with him and having a quick look at him, he was also quite wriggly as well. So this is the only pike that I took back to the water without giving him recovery time and just letting him slide off my hand and disappear back down into the bottom of this lake. And as we're getting later into this session, I got probably my most memorable bite of the session itself. I had a couple of little ticks which obviously let me know that there was a fish just hanging around the line, and all of a sudden it screamed off and that reel started spooling line out. Now this fish, although it wasn't the biggest fish in the lake, I think the biggest pike's around about sort of 25 pound in here, but this fish was definitely a fighter and liked to sort of try and dart around, move from one side to the other, and even have an attempt at pulling some line off. Now it wasn't big enough to be able to do this, but it was a fantastic fight from a lovely little fish as well. And as it turns out, this was also my biggest fish of the session as well, weighing in at 5 pound 3 ounces. Like I said, not the biggest pike in here, but one of the biggest pike I've ever caught. And like I said, the last time I fished for these guys I was a kid. I'm going to come out and I'm hopefully going to pick up some bigger fish at some point in the future. And this fish was also my favourite release as well, because this fish, unlike the rest which sort of just found a little bit of cover and sat underneath the bank for a little bit, this one, she swam off into the middle of the lake and looked absolutely great, waving goodbye with that tail. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed that, because unfortunately that just about brings us towards the end of our pike fishing video this week. And if you've enjoyed it, make sure you hit the subscribe button down here. Check out my latest fishing video over here, and of course my new freshwater playlist up top.